So is Versace The Dreamer a good fragrance or not? So I bought Versace The Dreamer about 2 years ago, something like that, after a lot of you asked me for a review of it. So finally, here's my review of it, and we are going to go through what it smells like, performance, mass appeal, usage and more. Versace The Dreamer is basically, sort of in a nutshell, an aromatic and sort of a powdery scent. And I think if you enjoy fragrances like Prada L'homme and Armani Code Parfum, then you most likely find this to be an interesting one. So let's start with the bottle, and this actually looks a bit different compared to the Eros line and the other ones, and for some reason I keep reaching for the cap, but yeah, there's no cap on this one. So when it comes to price, Versace The Dreamer can often be found for around 30 bucks for 100 ml on different discounters. So yeah, this is definitely a very affordable fragrance. This is a 50 ml, and I actually, unfortunately, paid more than 30 bucks for this. We have juniper, tarragon and artemisia at the top, iris, lily, flax at the heart of it, and tobacco blossom and amber at the base. So I'm gonna get to if it's a compliment getter, the performance of it, and how to use it in a short while, but let's start with what it smells like. So let's start with the opening. The opening, at least to me, actually has quite a bit of uniqueness to it. So this to me in the opening is definitely quite aromatic, sort of a spicy, fresh with a herbaceous feel to it. And while I don't think there's anything bad about the opening, it's definitely my least favorite part of this fragrance. I also feel it's the opening that's the sort of a least mass appealing part of it. But in less than 5 minutes, as Versace The Dreamer moves away from the opening and into the mids, I feel the sort of a spicy and herbaceous and aromatic opening is toned down quite a bit. So even though this still in the mids is quite sort of a spicy fresh and aromatic fresh, that part is actually softer and a lot easier on the nose. So this in the mids is definitely a bit more mass appealing. And in the mids you get quite a prominent dose of iris and a noticeable dose of lily, adding quite a prominent, but in a way a sort of a soft dose of florals to it. It's not the most intensely powdery scent though. It still has a bit of the spicy and aromatic freshness, but I do feel that part is softer in the mids. And when that powderiness starts to come in, I'm starting to think a bit of some of my favorites that are sort of a powdery, aromatic and fresh. And some of those are Givenchy Gentleman, Eau de Toilette Intense, Armani Code Parfum and Prada L'homme. I'm definitely not saying that Versace The Dreamer is the same as these three, but in a way this sort of falls into the same sort of a kind of scent, but with its own unique twist. So I do want to say something about the powderiness in Versace The Dreamer. I did mention Prada L'homme, Armani Code Parfum and Givenchy Gentleman Eau de Toilette Intense. I do think all those three are more sort of a intensely powdery. So this definitely has quite a prominent dose of powderiness to it. But if I'm going to sort of try and describe the powderiness, I'm going to say the powderiness here is not as sort of a thick and dense as some powdery fragrances can be. So Versace The Dreamer in the dry down to my nose is mostly a mix of powderiness, like this thin and less dense kind of powderiness, together with a floral side. And instead of being sort of aromatic, spicy, intense as it was in the opening, it's instead softly woody with just a hint of tobacco to it. The dry down is definitely, without a single doubt, my most favorite part of Versace The Dreamer, as it turns into this really sort of a softly powdery, softly woody kind of scent. So what's the vibe of Versace The Dreamer? This is quite an interesting scent in that I do feel the vibe changes as it goes from the opening through to the dry down. So the opening to me is actually more sort of a classy and more mature, but the more it goes into the dry down, I feel it's still sort of a classy, but with a sort of a sexy edge to it. Classy and elegant with a bit of sexiness to it. So what about compliments and mass appeal? Is Versace The Dreamer a compliment getter? So here's the thing, the opening is definitely not a compliment getting kind of scent. That part is definitely the least likable part of Versace The Dreamer. But as it moves into the dry down, where it basically becomes a mix of powderiness, soft woodiness, a bit of florals, and a soft hint of tobacco. This definitely turns into more of a compliment getting kind of scent. However, you can't compare this to some of the most compliment getting kind of fragrances out there. So when it comes to performance, at least on my skin, Versace The Dreamer is definitely not intensely projecting kind of scent. So this to me has sort of a moderate projection. People would definitely notice it if you spray it properly and if they are within sort of a normal conversation range. The longevity though on my skin is a bit better. So overall, both when it comes to projection and longevity, I'm rating Versace The Dreamer slightly above average. So let's talk a bit about the usage, so like seasons and occasions. When it comes to seasons, it's definitely not a heavy scent in any way, and I do feel Versace The Dreamer is a fragrance that you can use throughout the year, but with a focus on spring, summer, nights, fall and winter. As for occasions, anytime really, but Versace The Dreamer is definitely not my first choice when going to the gym or on very warm days. So who is Versace The Dreamer for? This is where it gets a bit tricky, and I do not recommend you to blind buy it. That aromatic and spicy opening is definitely not for everyone. I do feel the drawdown, however, is something you most likely enjoy if you usually enjoy different kinds of powdery fragrances. So if you usually enjoy powdery fragrances that are softly woody and think you would enjoy that combo with a floral touch, then you most likely find this one to be an interesting one. Make sure you stay away if you usually do not enjoy any kind of powderiness. So let's talk about some of the alternatives to Versace The Dreamer. This to me is basically a mix of aromatic and spicy freshness in the opening with a sort of a herbal kind of feel to it. That's the opening. Then the drawdown to me is mostly a combination of powderiness, soft woodiness together with a floral touch and a soft hint of tobacco. So when I think about alternatives, I'm mostly thinking about something that is of the combination of powderiness and soft woodiness. So the first alternative I want to talk about is Givenchy Gentleman, the Eau de Toilette Intense. This is basically an aromatic and woody scent with a spicy kick. It does have a prominent dose of powderiness, but I don't feel the powderiness is of the sort of a super dense and super thick kind. This is absolutely gorgeous. It's definitely one of the more sort of a versatile scents in the Gentleman line. The next alternative to Versace The Dreamer is one of my absolute favorites from the Armani Code line. This is Armani Code Parfum, and this to me is basically a mix of citrusy and aromatic freshness. You get quite a prominent dose of powderiness. The powderiness, however, feels a bit different if you compare these two. It's also a bit woody with a dose of vanilla. That combination, absolutely fantastic. The next alternative is Prada L'homme, and this to me is basically a mix of freshness, powderiness and soft woodiness. Now the freshness here, at least to my nose, is a mix of spicy freshness, aromatic freshness and floral freshness. This is absolutely fantastic. None of these three are the same as Versace The Dreamer, but with that said, these three are some of my absolute favorites when it comes to fragrances that are a combination of powderiness, freshness and woodiness. So how am I going to rate Versace The Dreamer? The opening is definitely not my favorite part of it. The drawdown is a lot better, and I actually think the drawdown smells good. But I do not think this is a masterpiece, and when it comes to this kind of scent, basically something that is powdery and a bit woody with a bit of sort of a freshness to it, I have these and more, which I actually prefer wearing more. These are some of my absolute favorite powder fragrances. So this, when I think of this kind of scent to wear, I usually, and that's the reason why the dent is not bigger than this, don't reach for this. So it's not that I don't like Versace The Dreamer, but when I have all of these and some other ones which I prefer over it, that basically means I reach for this one a lot less. So my rating of Versace The Dreamer is going to be something like 7 or 7.5. So I want to know how you feel about Versace The Dreamer. Do you feel this is a masterpiece? Do you love it? Do you feel it's just okay? Do you absolutely hate it? Let me know in the comments. Please drop a like and make sure you subscribe and make sure you check out my other videos over there.